when you look at a map, you kind of expect simplicity, right? Like green means forest, blue means river.
Hmm.
You look at it, and I don't know, it feels like a board game. Just a flat piece of paper telling you how to get from point A to point B.
Exactly. It feels totally static, like it's completely two-dimensional.
Right. But if you're a military commander or, an operational analyst looking at the island of Sri Lanka, that flat piece of paper isn't a board game at all. It's a 3D meat grinder.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a machine that actively dictates who lives, who dies, and exactly how a war is fought. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are pulling from this really fascinating source chapter titled simply Terrain and Climate. And we're going to explore how geography is, quite literally, destiny.
It really is destiny. I mean, to understand the tactile nightmare of this landscape, we first have to zoom all the way out and look at the global board. Like, why does Sri Lanka's location even matter?
Right. Why have people fought over this specific patch of land for centuries?
Exactly. Well, if you look at the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka sits right on the key sea lines of communication. It is this massive maritime hub. You've got Colombo on the west coast, which serves as a major international port connecting east and west.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this for a second, because I'm looking at the dimensions here. It's an island,
Yeah.
right, sitting just 32 kilometers away from the southern tip of India.
Yeah, just across the Palk Strait.
Right, separated by this really narrow stretch of water.
Mm.
And it has a standard 12 nautical mile maritime boundary.
Mm.
But I have to push back a little on the idea that its strategic value is just, being a maritime stopover point.
Okay, how so?
Well, if I look at the macro dimensions, like 432 kilometers from north to south, 224 kilometers east to west, and I see these massive imposing mountains right in the middle, I don't just see a port island, I see a fortress.
Oh, wow. That's a brilliant way to frame it. A fortress. And what's really fascinating here is that the terrain of this fortress doesn't just sit there passively waiting to be fought over. It actively shapes the decisions of anyone trying to move across it.
It fights back.
Exactly. It dictates your logistics. It limits your avenues of approach. So to really see how this works, we need to build a mental map together for you listening. And I think we should start right from the center.
I agree. So we drop into the south-central part of the island, and we hit the Central Highlands. If this island is a fortress, like we said, this is the citadel.
The absolute core.
Right. It's this high plateau running north to south for about 65 kilometers. And the elevations are, they're staggering for an island of this size. On west, you have Adams Peak rising to 2,243 meters.
Yeah, that's huge.
And on the east, you've got Namanakuli at 2,036 meters. Then to the north, the Knuckles Massif rises over 1,800 meters. And it's not just high, it's full of steep escarpments and incredibly deep gorges.
Right. So put yourself in the boots of a commander trying to win a campaign here. You have thousands of troops, you've got heavy artillery, and you have daily supply convoys that need to keep moving. You look at those mountains, what do?
I mean, I'm certainly not trying to march an army over a 2,000-meter peak with deep gorges. That's just a logistical suicide mission.
Precisely. You don't go over it. You go around it.
Right.
The operational impact of the Central Highlands is that it acts exactly like a massive boulder sitting in the middle of a fast-moving stream. It forces all the water.
Which in this case is the army.
Exactly. The water is the major troop movements, the mechanized units, the supply chains. It forces all of that to route entirely around the center. The geography violently funnels you into the plains and the coastal belts.
Which makes sense because the plains make up most of the island's surface, right? Like, these plains sit mostly between 30 to 200 meters above sea level. Though the source material notes this really wild geological feature in the southeast.
Oh, the transition zone.
Yeah, the transition from the plains to the mountains there isn't gradual at all. It's completely abrupt. The mountains just rise up out of nowhere like a massive impenetrable wall. But generally speaking, if I'm a commander funneled into these plains, I'm thinking, great, flat ground, better mobility.
Well, you do get better mobility, yes. But warfare is always a trade-off.
Right. There's always a catch.
Exactly. Better mobility often means highly varied visibility. For example, in the Southwest, extensive historical erosion has worn down the ridges and deposited this incredibly rich soil. That makes the area highly agricultural.
So you're dealing with farmland and dense civilian populations?
Yes. And in the north and east, you have these vast, flat plains that are suddenly dissected by narrow, hard granite ridges. So visibility is constantly changing. But if you really want to move heavy assets, you end up pushed even further outright onto the coastal belt.
which sits at an elevation of what, roughly 30 meters?
Yep, about 30 meters.
And this is where the ports come into play.
Exactly. You have sandy beaches and extensive lagoons. But in the northeast, where the coastline violently cuts across crystalline rocks, you get these dramatic rocky cliffs and massive deep bays.
Right, and this specific geological quirk created Trincomalee.
Yes. One of the world's best natural deepwater harbors. It's literally the 5th largest in the world. And down in the southwest, you have Galley. For a military force, these deepwater ports are the holy grail. They provide massive amphibious potential and the crucial docking points you need to offload heavy logistics, armor, and troops.
Okay, so to summarize the macro picture for everyone,
Right.
the mountains block you, forcing you to the plains, and the need for heavy logistics pins you to the coast.
That's the formula.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say you follow that coast all the way to the very northern tip of the island. You arrive at the Jaffna Peninsula. And as I'm reading the source material, I'm realizing Jaffna breaks every single rule we just established.
Oh, completely.
It's almost like it was stitched on from a completely different map.
It really is. The environmental constraints in Jaffna are so extreme, they require a totally different way of thinking about warfare. I mean, any commander stepping into Jaffna has to immediately throw out the playbook they used for the rest of the island.
Yet listen to these geographical facts, because they're bizarre. The entire peninsula is basically a pancake. We're talking a median elevation of only 2 to 3 meters above sea level.
Basically at water level.
Right. And there are 0 forests. None.
Yeah.
And no rivers or streams either. Nothing on the surface. This entire densely populated urban area relies completely on well water drawn from underground limestone aquifers.
It's crazy. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of military strategy, commanders usually analyze terrain using the OCOPE framework, right?
Oh, okay, OCOPE. Break that down for us.
It stands for observation, cover, and concealment, obstacles, avenues of approach, and key terrain. Let's start with avenues of approach, because Jaffna is essentially an island in all but name. It is connected to the mainland by one very specific, incredibly narrow strip of land.
Elephant Pass.
Yes, Elephant Pass is the doorway to Jaffna. It is the ultimate geographic choke point. You cannot just fan out and drive your tanks into Jaffna wherever you want. You have to go through the door.
And if I'm defending Jaffna, I know you have to come through that door. So I'm pointing every single weapon I have right at it.
Exactly. It's a meat grinder. And let's say you survive Elephant Pass and push into the peninsula. Your nightmare is just beginning, because your movement remains entirely channelized.
By what?
Water. The peninsula is littered with over 1,000 small ponds and these massive inland lagoons like Uparu and Vadamarachi. You combine those vast bodies of salt water with highly cultivated, soaking wet paddy fields, and you have severe movement restrictions everywhere you look.
Wait, let me stop you right there. Because if I'm looking at a completely flat landscape with no forests, my first thought as a commander is send in the armor. You know, tanks, armored personnel carriers, mechanized infantry. Shouldn't flat ground be an attacker's paradise?
Well, in a desert, maybe, but not in a wetland. Mechanized elements are incredibly heavy. If you drive a tank off the road in Jaffna, it sinks into a paddy field or a lagoon margin. It gets bogged down instantly. Yeah. So your heavy armor is now confined strictly to the established road network. And what happens when you force a tank to stay on a narrow road?
It becomes a sitting duck.
Precisely. Which brings us to the concept of cover and concealment. Remember, there are no forests here, so where do defending forces hide?
They hide in the dense, built-up urban areas.
Exactly. The cities and towns become the ultimate concrete cover. They're perfect for laying ambushes, setting up sniper positions, and making rapid getaways through narrow alleyways that tanks just can't follow.
And the road network itself creates a trap. The source mentions that you have all these lateral roads connecting to main axial roads, and they all converge right on Jaffna City, the Palali Airfield, and the Kankasantharai or KKS seaport.
Right, the key terrain.
So all the traffic is naturally funneled into the most heavily populated, heavily defended areas.
And the operational consequence of this is incredibly grim. Imagine you are the attacking force. You have insurgents or defending troops using these densely populated urban grids as a fortress. You are taking heavy fire. Normally, your doctrine might say, call in heavy artillery or call in an airstrike.
Right, level the building, but you can't.
Because of the civilian density.
Exactly. Using heavy artillery or close air support in a flat, Concrete maze packed with civilians is going to cause massive collateral damage. It becomes a political and humanitarian disaster.
Wow.
So your high-tech military advantage is totally neutralized by the terrain and the population density. You are forced into brutal block-by-block, house-by-house urban combat, all while surrounded by lagoons and swamps.
So here's a memory anchor for you listening. Lagoon plus paddy plus built-up area equals movement channelization. It sounds like an absolute nightmare. You have the water channeling your movement, the paddy fields trapping your vehicles, and the urban environment neutralizing your heavy weapons.
It's the perfect storm. So let's say a commander looks at Jaffa and says, forget this. Let's pull back. Let's trace our forces south, out of the peninsula, back through Elephant Pass, and into the Vanni region.
Okay, moving into the Vanni.
We drop out of this dense, flat urban environment, and suddenly we are in a sparsely populated rolling plain covered in dry jungle. That sounds like a relief, right?
You'd think so until you actually step into the Vanni.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, the Vanni requires a completely different tactical mind. Honestly, to fight effectively here, a commander almost needs a degree in botany.
Botany.
Really? Because the source material makes a critical distinction. Not all jungles are created equal. You have secondary forests and you have primary forests, and they kill you in entirely different ways.
Okay, let's explore that, because when I think jungle, I just picture a solid wall of green. But the source points out that secondary forests, places like Wilpatu and Madhu, are defined by what grows near the ground.
Right. Secondary forests are areas that were perhaps cleared a long time ago and have grown back. They are full of small trees, dense scrub, and vicious thorny thickets.
Nasty stuff.
The undergrowth is intensely tangled. If you were trying to move a squad of soldiers through it, visibility is reduced to near zero. You literally can't see 5 feet in front of you.
Right.
Movement is agonizingly slow and incredibly loud because you're hacking your way through brush.
Which makes it a defender's paradise. If I'm a militant group, I can build an entire hidden base in there. I can move cross-country completely unseen by aerial drones or patrols.
Yes.
And because an advancing army has to hack their way through, I can lay improvised explosive devices, IEDs, or set up devastating ambushes along their path.
Exactly. Secondary scrub turns a modern army into blind infantry. But then there is the operational plot twist.
The primary forests.
Yes. The source notes that the forests stretching from places like Weli Oya over to Mulativu are ancient. They have never been cleared.
So you have these massive, ancient trees growing close together, forming this incredibly thick overhead canopy. But the source explicitly points out that underneath that canopy, there is almost no undergrowth.
Right. The jungle floor is relatively clear.
This raises a fascinating tactical question. If the jungle floor is clear, going is much easier, right? Your lines of sight on the ground are much further. You can see the enemy. But consider the battle from a three-dimensional perspective. What does that thick canopy overhead actually do?
It creates a roof, a solid green ceiling over the entire battlefield.
Yes, and that roof completely alters the war.
It really does. It dramatically limits the effectiveness of artillery. Shells might detonate high up in the heavy branches instead of on the ground where the enemy actually is.
Oh, so they explode in the trees.
Exactly, sending shrapnel everywhere, but maybe not hitting the target. Even worse, it completely negates close air support. From the sky, a fighter pilot or a bomber just sees an endless sea of broccoli. They cannot distinguish friendly lines from enemy lines. They can't see the bases.
So once again, the terrain strips the attacking army of their biggest advantages, planes and big guns.
It's like fighting inside a massive dark green room. And the logistics of surviving in that room are terrifying because you still need food, you still need ammunition.
Right, armies march on their stomachs.
And you can't rely on the trains. The source points out a crucial historical fact. The Northern Line Railway passing through the Vanni was completely destroyed by rebels after 1990.
The destruction of that railway is a masterclass in using geography against your enemy. Without the rail line, how do you move massive amounts of supplies?
You have to put them on trucks.
And trucks need roads. Because cross-country movement is so impeded by those patches of secondary jungle and large lagoons like the infamous Nanthi Kadal, all of your logistics are forced onto a few very specific, very vulnerable dirt road axes.
Which means the enemy knows exactly where you have to drive.
Yes. It makes your supply convoys incredibly predictable.
And in warfare, predictability is fatal. Because of this reliance on roads, the towns that sit on those intersections become the most vital pieces on the board. Places like Kilinachi, Vavunia, and Mulativu aren't just random towns. They are critical communication and transit hubs.
So if you want to control the vast, sprawling jungle of the Vani, you don't fight over the trees. You fight over those specific road intersections.
It's incredible. The terrain literally dictates the target list. So we've navigated the urban, watery maze of Jaffna, and we survived the blind canopy of the Vani. Let's move our deep dive east into the eastern province.
Okay, heading east, we're talking about areas like Trincomalee, Batticaloa, and Amparai. And here, the climate starts to dramatically shift the rules again. We're looking at a hot tropical environment totally dominated by the northeastern monsoon.
Oh, that monsoon is a game changer. It brings heavy, unrelenting rainfall from October to January, and the terrain of the east is fundamentally defined by water. You have these low-lying coastal plains, but they are constantly intersected by massive, powerful rivers. Most notably, the Mahaweli Ganga, which snakes across the landscape for 335 kilometers.
335 kilometers. That is a massive geographical scar across the map. And the operational consequence of a river that size, combined with the numerous huge lagoons like the Batticaloa Lagoon, is that they slice the province into horizontal east-west segments.
They completely fragment the battlefield.
Right. Think about how water fragments movement. If you are a commander trying to move your forces north to south through the eastern province, you can't just drive in a straight line.
No, the rivers and lagoons block you.
No.
You are forced right up against the coast to utilize the established coastal road and track infrastructure.
And if I try to flank inland, let's say I want to move further west to avoid the coastal highway.
You can't. If you move west, your movement is severely impeded by the terrain rapidly rising toward those central highlands we talked about at the very beginning.
Right back into the citadel.
Exactly. So you are trapped between the rising mountains to your west and the ocean to your east, while constantly having to find bridges to cross the rivers slicing across your path.
It's a logistical straitjacket.
Yeah.
And we can't talk about the eastern coastline without talking about the mangroves.
Oh, the mangroves.
Yeah, the coastal areas are incredibly rich with these dense mangrove ecosystems. Operationally speaking, these are nature's perfect hiding spots.
They really are fascinating from a tactical perspective. Their root systems are incredibly dense, growing directly out of the tidal mud. They are virtually impenetrable from the outside and invisible from above.
So another defender's advantage.
Absolutely. For an insurgent force, they are the ideal environment for caching weapons, hiding small attack boats, and stockpiling ammunition and supplies. You can hide an entire logistical network inside a mangrove swamp, and a conventional army driving down the coastal road would never even know it was there.
And all of this geographical tension, the rivers, the coastal roads, the mangroves, it all anchors right around Trincomalee.
Because of that deep water harbor, Trincomalee is the strategic heart of the East. Whoever holds it controls the vital node for any heavy naval movement, resupply ships, and international logistics.
So to control the east, you absolutely need Trincomalee.
Yes. And you need to control the major built-up communication centers like Batticaloa and Amparai just to keep those coastal roads open.
Wow. Okay, so what does this all mean for you listening? We've covered a massive amount of conceptual ground here. If we pull all these threads together, a fascinating, albeit terrifying reality emerges for any military force operating on this island.
Yeah, the terrain demands completely different armies.
That is the ultimate takeaway. Think about the friction we've just described. Let's do a quick exam prep framework, right? Like compare Jaffna and the Vani.
Sure. If I train an army to fight in Jaffna, I'm training them for close quarters urban combat. I'm training them to navigate narrow concrete alleys, to cross flooded paddy fields, and to operate without heavy artillery because of the civilian population.
But then, if you take that exact same highly trained force and deploy them just a few miles south into the Vani.
They are functionally useless.
Right.
Their urban tactics mean nothing in a primary canopy forest where they can't call in air support and are confined to single dirt roads surrounded by invisible enemies.
And if you move them east, suddenly they have to become experts in river crossings and mangrove swamp clearing.
Exactly. The geography forces a commander to constantly adapt. You're completely restructuring your force and changing your tactical doctrine based purely on the elevation, the mud, the trees, and the aquifers.
So let's lock in some rapid recall facts. The Palk Strait is that 32-kilometer buffer from India.
Right.
Jaffna is flat, no forests, well water only.
Yep.
Elephant Pass is the gateway, the ultimate choke point.
Crucial.
The Vani canopy neutralizes your artillery and air support. Mangroves are your logistics hideouts. And the railways being destroyed post-1990 forces total reliance on the roads.
You've got it. It proves that a map is never just a map. It doesn't just show you where things are. It dictates how human beings behave. Geography is destiny. It dictates the friction of war.
We asked you to put on the hat of an operational analyst today to look past the green and blue shapes on the paper and see the machine underneath. Thank you for joining us on this tactical journey across Sri Lanka.
But before we go, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Oh, yes.
We've spent a lot of time analyzing how the physical land, the dirt, the concrete, the trees, dictates the tactics of both the attacker and the defender. But consider the climate.
The monsoon.
Specifically, those northeastern monsoons that hit between October and January. We know they dump massive amounts of water onto this already saturated landscape. They flood the lagoons. They turn the paddy fields into impassable lakes. They turn the deep roads of the Vani into sucking mud traps.
It changes the entire board.
It does. So here is the puzzle for you to solve on your own. If you were a commander sitting in your tent and looking at this map knowing the rains are coming, how would you intentionally use the turning of the seasons, combined with this unforgiving geography, to spring a trap on an advancing enemy?
Now that is a scenario worth exploring. Keep analyzing the world around you, because the landscape is always telling a story, and usually hiding a trap if you know how to read it. Catch you on the next deep dive.